In 2008, in the small Indian village of Bonkeri, a family of 8 gathered for dinner, enjoyed tea, and retired for the night as they typically did. However, that night proved to be tragically different. 7 members of the family, including a 10-month-old infant, went to sleep and never awakened. The sole survivor of this horrific event was Shabnam Ali, who found herself in a state of shock, unable to grasp the magnitude of the tragedy that had unfolded in her home. In an instant, her entire family was lost. Today's discussion centers on a chilling crime known as the Massacred District Massacre, marking the first time I am addressing a case from India, a story that has profoundly moved me. If you find this narrative compelling, please like the video, and let us delve into today's case. Our narrative transports us to Bonkeri village in the ROA district of India, renowned for its mango cultivation. The village's fertile lands are predominantly owned by affluent families. Nestled among these mango orchards was the residence of the Ali family, a 2-story home that housed 8 individuals. The family patriarch, Shah Ali, was 55 years old, while his wife, Hashmi, was 50. Their daughter, Shabnam, was 23, and their son, Rashid, was 22. Also residing with them was their eldest son, Anas, aged 35, along with his wife and their 10-month-old son, Orsh. Additionally, their 14-year-old cousin, Rabia, lived with them. The Ali family was well regarded in the community, known for their education and success, embodying the ideal of a happy family until the fateful day of April 15, 2008. On that day, a massacre occurred that would haunt the villagers for years to come. Around 2 a.m., while the family slept, their neighbors. The Ali family was abruptly awakened by alarming noises emanating from their home. A woman was heard crying and screaming for assistance at the top of her lungs. Their neighbor, Ismat Hussain, whose residence was in close proximity to the Ali family's house, was also roused by the distressing sounds. The first thought that crossed his mind was the possibility of a burglar having entered the Ali household. He quickly awakened his son, and together they proceeded to investigate the situation. As they made their way there, they encountered other neighbors who had also been alerted by the commotion, all of whom believed that thieves were inside the Ali home and that the family was in dire need of help. Upon reaching the Ali residence, the villagers attempted to open the front iron gate, only to find it locked from the inside. They then circled the property in search of an alternative entry, all the while hearing the woman's cries for help growing increasingly frantic. As they drew nearer, they spotted a woman on the first-floor balcony, visibly distressed. They recognized her as Shabnam Ali, the daughter of the homeowner, due to the small size of the village. Shabnam was on the balcony, shouting in a state of panic. The villagers urged her to come down, but she continued to cry out, insisting, "It's my turn next, I will be killed." When they inquired about who posed a threat to her, Shabnam remained silent, likely in shock, and kept repeating, "They will kill me, it's my turn." The villagers endeavored to reassure her, affirming their presence was to protect her. They asked if any assailants were still inside the house, but she did not reply. Eventually, they managed to persuade her to descend and unlock the door. The villagers opened the door to assist her, and upon entering the house, they were met with a horrifying scene. Shabnam's father, lay at the entrance, covered in blood. As they proceeded to Rashid's room, they discovered blood splattered on the walls and Rashid himself on the bed, suffering from a severe neck wound. The other rooms revealed similarly gruesome sights, with blood staining the walls and beds. It was clear that the perpetrator was exceptionally brutal, as even the 10-month-old Orsh had not been spared. The villagers found Orsh beside his deceased parents, and his wife was also lifeless. Unlike the others, Orsh bore no cuts on his neck but exhibited signs of strangulation. In the room where Shabnam was meant to sleep with her mother, they found Hashmi and their 14-year-old cousin Rabia, both lifeless in a pool of blood, meeting the same tragic fate as the others. The scene within the house was utterly horrifying, leaving one to wonder who could commit such an atrocity against an entire family. The perplexing question remained, how did Shabnam manage to survive? Following the villagers' discovery, they promptly contacted the police. Upon their arrival, the authorities hoped for a swift resolution, relying on Shabnam as a crucial eyewitness to the events. However, Shabnam was in a state of shock, weeping and unable to articulate her experience, a reaction that was entirely understandable given the trauma she had endured. Their neighbor, Ismat Hussein, who had responded to her cries for help, offered to take her to his home until she regained her composure. Meanwhile, investigators sought to uncover whether the family had any adversaries or individuals who harbored animosity towards them. They learned that the homeowner, Shadowy, was an art teacher at the university. A commendable reputation was established by him as he provided free lessons to underprivileged children. His eldest son, Anist, was a proficient engineer, while his younger son, Rashid, was pursuing a degree in engineering. The family was well regarded and had no adversaries. Shabnam, a remarkably intelligent young woman, held 2 master's degrees, one in geography and the other in English. She served as a teacher at the village's primary school and was also an accomplished artist, a talent likely inherited from her father. Shabnam had a passion for assisting others. Her university colleague, Osman Sofi, recounted how she supported him during a challenging academic year, even covering his tuition fees. He also noted that they often commuted to university together on the same bus, and on one occasion she defended him against harassment. This inclination to help others was characteristic of her and her entire family, who were active members of their community and had no enemies. However, that fateful night, an incident occurred within the Ali family's home that led to their tragic demise. Shabnam remained as the sole witness and survivor to recount the events of that night. The following day, she began to regain her composure and was able to communicate with the police. On the night of April 14th, she recounted that the family had shared dinner before retiring for the night. Due to the oppressive heat, she opted to sleep on the balcony, while her father chose to rest in front of the house door, a decision that may seem peculiar to some. In rural areas, it is not uncommon for events to unfold at unusual hours. Around 2 a.m., Shabnam awoke to the sound of rain and opted to sleep on the lower level of her home. As she descended the stairs, she became aware of the disturbing events that had transpired in the house during her slumber on the balcony. Fortunately, the intruders had not noticed her presence. Shabnam was convinced that the assailants had scaled the house wall and accessed the interior through the balcony. After committing their atrocious act, they exited through the front door. However, it is important to note that the iron gate of the house was securely locked from the inside, and there were no indications of forced entry. Upon witnessing the aftermath of the crime against her family, Shabnam promptly secured the gate and locked the balcony door, ensuring that all potential access points to the house were closed off, driven by the fear that one of the assailants might return to harm her as well. From her statements, investigators deduced that she had not seen the perpetrator and lacked a clear understanding of the events, as she had been asleep on the balcony and remained unnoticed. Nevertheless, following her interrogation, the investigators found inconsistencies in her account. If the criminals had indeed entered through the balcony, they would have needed a means to reach it, given that it was approximately 4.5 meters high. A ladder would have been necessary for such an ascent, as it was unlikely they could have scaled the wall unaided. During their search of the premises, they discovered a long pipe situated nearby. However, this pipe was too fragile to support a person's weight. Ultimately, it became evident that there was no viable entry point to the house other than the balcony, and the front door remained locked, reinforcing the mystery surrounding the incident. Signs of forced entry were evident. Shabnam claimed she had slept on the balcony that night. However, it was peculiar that there were no pillows, sheets, or any bedding available on the balcony, while her bed was neatly made, suggesting she had intended to sleep there. Her pillow and sheets remained on the bed. Additionally, a curious detail emerged: none of the family members exhibited any signs of struggle or self-defense wounds on their hands or arms, indicating that they did not attempt to resist the assailant or assailants. This raised questions about how 7 individuals could be killed in succession without any of them noticing or hearing anything. Why did no one attempt to defend themselves? Another noteworthy observation was that each family member had a cup of tea beside them, and an empty medication strip was discovered, leading to speculation that the medication may have been a sedative. The following day, a high-ranking official visited the residence, conducted an inspection, and assured Shabnam of significant financial compensation for the tragedy she endured. However, the lead investigator harbored serious doubts regarding Shabnam's account due to the evidence uncovered. Although the evidence was circumstantial and not definitively conclusive, the suspicions were substantial. Consequently, the investigator conferred with the official, requesting that no financial assistance be provided to Shabnam until he had an additional 48 hours to ascertain why her narrative appeared inconsistent. The investigator diligently pursued the truth, aiming to uncover the actual perpetrator. He ordered autopsies for all the deceased and sought Shabnam's mobile phone records, returning to the scene of the incident. A comprehensive search was conducted to uncover additional evidence that could shed light on the events of that night. Gradually, the situation became more comprehensible as investigators discovered Shabnam's clothing, which bore bloodstains, despite her not wearing them when the villagers arrived at the residence. However, the pivotal moment in the investigation came with the forensic report, which explained why none of the 7 family members had defended themselves or awakened during the incident. The forensic expert identified traces of a sedative in the bodies of 6 family members, a drug typically used for anxiety relief and potential sedation. Notably, the only individual without any trace of the sedative was Arch, the 10-month-old infant who succumbed to suffocation. This raised the question of who could have administered the sedative to everyone without arousing suspicion. Further analysis of Shabnam's phone records revealed that she was not asleep, as she had claimed during the incident. Investigators found that she made a phone call approximately 5 minutes before and 10 minutes after the crime occurred. On the day of the incident, she contacted the same individual 55 times, totaling 900 calls for that month, which was still ongoing. This represented an extraordinary volume of communication. The calls were made between 7:30 p.m. on April 14th and 1:09 a.m. on April 15th, with reports indicating a call was placed at 1:40 a.m., while neighbors reported hearing screams at 2 a.m. This indicates that Shabnam was awake during the crime. If someone had entered the house, she should have noticed. Therefore, it raises the question of whom she was conversing with on the phone during that time, given the numerous calls made. Upon tracing the call, authorities identified the number's owner as a 24-year-old young man named Salem, who resided in the same village. It became evident that on the night of the incident, Shabnam had called Salem instead of contacting the police. She locked all the doors, went to the balcony, and began to scream for help. The police concluded that both she and Salem were crucial to solving the case, as all evidence pointed towards Shabnam. The crime appeared to be meticulously planned, beginning with the tea consumed by all family members before bedtime, which positioned Shabnam as a significant suspect. The investigators summoned her again for questioning, nearly 2 days after the crime had occurred. Shabnam appeared extremely fatigued, a condition that could be attributed to her innocence or, if guilty, the stress of potentially facing imprisonment. Consequently, the police called a doctor to assess her condition for questioning. The doctor's examination revealed a shocking twist: Shabnam was 6 months pregnant, despite being unmarried. This revelation was particularly troubling, given her background in a conservative family from a small village. Upon learning of her pregnancy, the police began to piece together the motive, leading them to suspect that the perpetrator was likely someone from within her family. When both Shabnam and Salem were summoned for questioning, it did not take long for them to confess the entire truth. They were deeply in love, and Shabnam was pregnant with Salem's child. Both wished to marry and build a life together. Shabnam's family had always disapproved of Salem, likely unaware of her pregnancy. Her family was well educated and enjoyed a respectable social and financial status, which contributed to their disapproval of their daughter marrying an unemployed man who had not completed primary school. In contrast, Shabnam was the most educated member of her family, holding 2 master's degrees. From their viewpoint, there was a clear lack of compatibility between the two. Additionally, Shabnam's father was a university professor, while Salim's father was a simple street food vendor. Her family believed that the marriage would be doomed due to the stark differences in cultural, social, and financial backgrounds. More critically, Shabnam identified as a Sufi Muslim, whereas Salim's family adhered to Sunni Islam, further complicating matters. It was evident that her family was entirely opposed to Salim, leading to significant tension in Shabnam's relationship with them. As it became increasingly clear that her family would never accept Salim, the couple devised a sinister plan to eliminate her family. Sim procured drugs, which Shabnam then infused into tea for her family members. Once they had consumed the tea and lost consciousness, Shabnam opened the door for Salim, who entered armed with an axe. He proceeded to move from room to room, killing each family member with the weapon. Shabnam not only observed these acts but also assisted him by holding the heads of the victims to facilitate the execution. The only family member spared was Orish, the youngest at just 10 months old, who did not share the same fate as the others, as per the plan devised by Salim and Shabnam. Orish, overwhelmed with grief after the tragic events, began to cry out loudly. In an effort to silence him and prevent attracting attention, Shabnam wrapped her arms around his neck and strangled him. Once they had completed the heinous act of murdering the entire family, Shabnam instructed Salim to leave the house, locked the door from the inside, changed her attire, and then went out onto the balcony to feign cries for help. Meanwhile, Sim returned to his residence, concealed the axe, and changed his clothes. Curiously, Salim re-entered the house accompanied by some villagers, claiming he had also heard Shabnam's cries and wanted to check on the situation, as his home was nearby, allowing for a quick return. The investigators requested Salim to reveal the location of the murder weapon, to which he complied, indicating where he had hidden the axe at his home. Salim demonstrated cunning by concealing the weapon within his own residence. Consequently, they recovered the axe, which bore traces of blood, along with the clothing Salim had worn that fateful night. On April 19, just 5 days after the crime, both Salim and Shabnam were apprehended. The news of the crime spread rapidly through newspapers and media outlets, leaving the villagers and relatives of the Ali family in a state of disbelief regarding the events that had transpired. The gentle and reserved Shabnam was capable of actions that astonished her Aunt Fatima. Fatima expressed her surprise, noting that Shabnam was a kind girl with numerous friends who adored her. It appeared as though some malevolent influence had taken hold of her. Fatima also recounted Shabnam's deep affection for Orish, highlighting how she cherished carrying and playing with him, as well as her protective nature towards him. This behavior seemed perplexing, as if Shabnam had transformed into an entirely different individual. Months later, Shabnam gave birth to a son named Tdg while incarcerated. He remained with her until the age of 7, as Indian law permits a child born in prison to stay with their mother for a maximum of 6 years before being placed in an orphanage or taken by a relative. Usman Sai, a university friend of Shabnam, recalled how she had once assisted him by paying his tuition fees during a challenging period in his studies, acting as a supportive elder sister. After graduation, they lost touch, but upon learning of her situation and seeing her son available for adoption in the newspapers, he felt compelled to repay her kindness. Usman resolved to adopt the boy and visited Shabnam in prison to discuss the arrangement. Upon meeting her, he sensed a profound change. She was no longer the Shabnam he had once known. Strangely, when he assured her that he would care for her son as his own, Shabnam warned him that he would be unable to shield the boy from the criminals who had murdered her family, asserting that they would also seek to kill him. Despite her apprehensions, she had no alternative but to allow him to take the child, even though both Salam and Shabnam had committed their crime out of an intense, reckless love. Each individual desired to marry and live together indefinitely. However, they turned against one another when the trial commenced, with each accusing the other in court. Shabnam asserted her innocence, claiming that Salim had entered the house through the roof armed with a knife and had murdered the entire family while she slept on the balcony. Conversely, Salim contended that he arrived only after Shabnam had called him, confessing to the murders and requesting his assistance in disposing of the weapon. The court found his account unconvincing and considered their initial confessions, which were consistent with the evidence indicating that they had conspired and carried out the crime together. This evidence included blood-stained clothing, the murder weapon bearing his fingerprints, drug-laced teacups, and a substantial array of additional evidence. Consequently, on July 15, 2010, the court convicted them and sentenced both Shabnam and Salim to death by hanging. Their appeal and subsequent request to the President of India were denied. In March 2021, their appeal was further rejected after images of Shabnam in prison, appearing relaxed, were circulated on WhatsApp. Following this, Shabnam was transferred to a higher security facility. Notably, she became the first woman in India to receive a death sentence in over 6 decades, and both she and Salim continue to await execution. Approximately 3 years ago, when her son Taj was 13, he petitioned the President of India for his mother's pardon from the death sentence. A logical question arises: why did Shabnam not flee with Salim and abandon her family? The straightforward answer is that Shabnam recognized that Salim was incapable of taking responsibility, they were both financially constrained, and Salim lacked qualifications or job opportunities. Shabnam found herself in a precarious situation, being pregnant and without a place to live or any means of support. She contemplated a drastic measure: if she were to eliminate her entire family, she would inherit the money from their home, allowing her and Salim to reside there. Salim's parents and sisters held out hope for his acquittal, firmly believing in his innocence.
They were convinced that he had been at home during the crime and only ventured out after the villagers gathered to investigate the incident at the Ali family's residence. His mother, in particular, was unwavering in her belief in his innocence, as he had sworn to her that he bore no responsibility for the events that transpired. She reasoned that the blood on his clothing must have come from an external source while he was at home. The case presented today is undeniably tragic, yet several aspects caught my attention. Firstly, the prompt response of the police, who managed to resolve the case within just 5 days. Secondly, the official who took the initiative to visit the scene and expressed a desire to compensate Shabnam for her traumatic experience. Lastly, Usman, her loyal friend, who was eager to repay the kindness she had shown him. These elements were, in my opinion, the most commendable aspects of the narrative. In conclusion, I would appreciate hearing your thoughts on today's case and look forward to our next video. Farewell.